Ago, I noticed this blog on The Guardian, NASA-funded study, industrial civilization headed for irreversible collapse. And I was intrigued, obviously, it's an intriguing title, but the study wasn't actually linked, so I couldn't get a lot more information. I was interested to note this morning that the paper is now online, and so I went ahead and called it up because it's turned into quite a kerfuffle. As you can see, this blog has actually been shared on Facebook more than 100,000 times and tweeted some 7,000 times, and there's now some response to it. So, without going into a lot of detail, since I'm doing this in just a couple of minutes, I'm going to jump to the paper itself, which is the reference of all of this, and does this actually predict the end of human civilization? And is it NASA funded, which ended up being sort of the two key issues. And I think a key point here is that the paper basically talks about the building of a model, the handy model, and these are the four equations in the model. And these four equations basically are used to generate outputs like this in terms of whether we get stability or whether we get collapse and the different variables. And what was sort of new about this model, apparently, as you can see here, is the idea that it models two separate features which seem to appear across societies that have collapsed. One, the stretching of resources due to strain placed on the ecological carrying capacity, and two, the economic stratification of society into elites and masses, or commoners. And so that's what's going on here, is they're tracking wealth, nature, which is the resources, the commoners, the average people, the carrying capacity, and the elites, and coming to the conclusion that, under conditions like today's, it's actually difficult to avoid the collapse over time. That said, I seriously doubt that any of the authors of this would characterize this as any kind of a predictive model of what is going to happen with civilization. It's a very simple four-equation model, which is fun to play with, I'm sure, but it's certainly not and should not be interpreted as a prediction of the future. And that's basically what led to some of the blog responses where people took issue with the question of, was it NASA funded? And it certainly wasn't NASA funded. It was funded by people who did have some NASA funding, and so they put that in everything they do. But it wasn't a NASA report or a NASA paper of any kind. But what was also interesting here was that it was picked up everywhere. This paper was picked up with basically no one going and reading the original article, and so has appeared all over the place in print and in blogs as sort of this NASA-funded study characterizing the possible collapse of human civilization, and that's what some of the issues have been. And this blogger, Keith Clure, has sort of taken it on in a couple of blogs and noted some of the issues, and they're certainly good points in terms of you can't overinterpret a model like this. You certainly shouldn't be characterizing this model as predicting anything, or even potentially predicting something. And there were other bloggers as well. Robert Wilson came out with a pretty strong statement, and then he actually expanded the topic a bit by pointing out that the author of the blog was involved in a number of sort of post 9/11 conspiracy theories, and sort of going after the blog author's credibility on that score. So that sort of got the whole thing a little more interesting. And then the author of the original blog came back yesterday with a new blog, sort of responding to all of these other reports and saying, yes, NASA was involved, although it was as I've already stated, saying that academics have said Handy's model is useful, and I'm sure it is. I mean, a lot of models are useful, but that doesn't mean they're predicting anything about actual events and actual civilization. And then he sort of went and did something interesting, which was pull in some other stuff in terms of Clure, who had criticized him, and pointing out that Clure has been on the hit list of Joe Romm, although a number of years ago. And given the fact that apparently Joe Romm felt that Keith Clure back then in 2009 had smeared his parents, who knows where this is where this is headed. I'll close with simply, oh, and he also mentioned, the blogger also mentioned another report which sort of had supposedly supported the Handy paper, but it was basically just saying this is a useful model. It was not in any way supporting the idea that that it's a predictive tool for human civilizations, and it's not a peer-reviewed paper or anything. It was a conference paper from earlier this year. So, at the end of the day, where are we left? And frankly, where I think we're left is with Pogo from 40 years ago. We have met the enemy, and he is us. I think that the only people who are winning in this particular debate are people who can point to all of this as sort of chaos in the field, which is really unfortunate. I mean, clearly this paper was mischaracterized at the beginning in terms of what it was really saying. Sensationalism is obviously common in this space and other spaces, but at some level one does do the field a disservice when we get into this kind of tit-for-tat mudslinging. And I'll leave it at that.